Thanks for having me. And today I hope to share some of the high-level results of our recent AI governance survey. And my friend David Talby will be here to provide kind of domain level and on-the-ground expertise throughout this presentation as well. So let's start with a little bit about myself. So my perspectives are basically colored by three things. One, I'm a hands-on data scientist and ML engineer, but I'm also advising a bunch of startups, and I've also invested in a bunch of startups. So some of these companies have done well, and I've benefited from seeing how companies are actually using these tools. The other thing is I've been a program chair for many years of numerous industry and applied conferences. So I get to see what people want to talk about. The submissions at these conferences are always interesting early signals for how companies are using these technologies. So this survey ran about over 100 days. And we got over 350 respondents through newsletters. I blasted the graded flow newsletter numerous times, and the folks at John Snow Labs did the same, and I got some industry partners to do the same as well. And we did run some ads in order to attract even more respondents. As you can see, as far as where the respondents are, many of the companies operate mainly in the US, and there's no standout as far as industries, but the usual suspects, tech, and since John Snow Labs was involved, healthcare as well. So a few segments that will repeatedly be surfaced during this presentation, as well as in the survey results, whenever you get a chance to read them, are company size. So as you can see, about a quarter of respondents came from what we call large companies. And over 30% came from small companies. So small companies meaning 500 or less employees. And we also looked at roles. So we define technical leaders to be either directors or engineering managers or VPs or CXOs. And we got 43% of those in the survey. So we will highlight how these different segments respond to the questions when appropriate. So, of course, one of the first questions we asked was the stage of adoption. For all respondents, it's about 30% that have some model in production, either the first model or already multiple solutions in production. And we did use this question to screen out some of the respondents for the remainder of the survey, because since this is a survey primarily concerned about AI governance, but in the context of generative AI mainly, we wanted people who are actually working in places that use generative AI. So we dropped about 10% of the sample, which left us with still over 300 respondents when all is said and done. All right, so this presentation, of course, I'll highlight the survey results, but I'll also highlight papers and articles from the Gradient Flow newsletter that might be informative and provide you with extra ideas and context. And so this will be data fusion, so to speak, of multiple data sources. So let's begin by looking at where people are in terms of adoption. So first of all, we asked, how would you characterize your usage of AI? Are you a developer, meaning you customize or even train your own generative AI model, your foundation model from scratch? Or are you simply using these models as a deployer? As you can see, for both the technical respondents and all respondents, the largest contingent comes from people or respondents saying that they actually do both. So As you can see, the technical respondents, close to half say they are both a deployer and a developer. So what is an AI developer really? Does that mean you train a model from scratch? So I think these days when people consider themselves as developing their own models, that also includes customizing their own models. So last year, the big topic was fine tuning, so primarily supervised fine tuning, which I consider a largely solved problem because there are so many services now where as long as you have labeled examples of prompt and response, you can easily fine tune one of the open weights foundation models. And then there's also an emerging class of companies trying to provide tools around reinforcement fine tuning. And this is mainly due to the fact that DeepSeek kind of published a paper explaining how they did that and how you might take a reasoning enhanced model, and further customize it for your needs. So there are companies trying to do that. Right now, it's still a bit early for reinforcement fine tuning. I think there's people are still trying to figure out what the right user interface will be for this. But if you're willing to work with companies as an early adopter with some consulting work from the companies, I think you can do this as well. And then, of course, there's reinforcement learning from human feedback, which seems to be the province of the people building the foundation models themselves at this point. So fine tuning, of course, is part of a broader topic around post-training. So basically, I think that the reality is when you say you're an AI developer, most likely you're not training a model from scratch. That would be what people call pre-training a model. So those are the foundation models themselves. So a lot of people are doing some aspect of post-training, which runs the gamut, right? So from instruction tuning, right? So using prompts to fine-tuning, to reinforcement fine-tuning, and then model distillation and compression. So the other question we asked here is how many models, how many generative AI use cases are you planning to deploy? As you can see, the technical leaders are a lot more, I guess, aggressive than the rest of the respondents. They're saying 3 to 5 in the next 12 months. Whereas if you look at all the respondents, the largest contingent is saying 1 to 2 use cases. And so in terms of company size, as you can see, the small companies are a lot more restricted. And I'm not sure exactly what the reason here is, but if I were to guess, it's probably just resources, right? So the small companies are saying they're only, and a huge majority of them, close to 3 out of 4, are saying, we only plan to deploy 1 to 2 use cases. And if you look at other surveys, so McKinsey, for example, had a survey out early this year, and you can see the number of companies saying they have at least one business function already in production for generative AI. So this is the McKinsey survey in the bottom, the light blue trend line. As you can see, it's really growing fast, right? So, but on the other hand, an Economist article recently highlighted another survey which says that a lot of the early pilot projects are getting abandoned, right? So more so than last year. So, David, any comments so far on kind of the setting the ground for the rest of the survey?
I think only one thing. I think, as you said, the border between what you call an AI developer and AI deployer seems to be vanishing a bit. Right? Where yes, it used to be as if you train a model, then you're a developer, and then if you deploy, you deploy. But But really, most of the deployers, whether they're small companies or large enterprises, the deployer is an in-house IT team or software development team, and on top of it, they go and they build the whole solution, right? So they do the prompting, and they do guardrails, and they add RAG, and maybe do some other alignment and other things. And from their perspective, they're absolutely a developer because they just put a number of man years into building their own custom solution, which has their own intellectual property. So I think that's definitely one of the things. I think we'll see. I think we will get to a point where a majority of the organizations will be both developers and deployers.
So based on your interaction with companies, so what aspect of post-training do you think they're most comfortable in, and what aspects of post-training would they want to become better at?
I think really there are two things. One is accuracy for a very, very specific task, right? Because if I'm if I'm building my own solution in-house, right? So I don't care about how Anthropic behaves across the board. I want to extract patient safety events, right? I want to evaluate loan applications, right? And automatically read insurance requests for underwriting. So just knowing really, is it accurate for my very specific use case, and how do I make that happen? That's one half of the story. The other half of the story is really just on the safety and reliability, right? Because once I put into a real business use case, it's not chat where there's a human and a human can identify bullshit to an extent. Then that's the other set of things that people are working on in-house.
And so, do you agree? So my what I tell companies is what you need to do is really get good at post-training. You'll never train a model from scratch, but you want to get as good in post-training as possible, which means you'll need to probably optimize your whatever platform you have for various aspects of post-training.
Yes. So we see absolutely. We obviously at Johnson we do train our own models, but we do not see customers training their own models. I would say even in the past year, we see very, very few cases of anyone doing even fine-tuning. Because really people are they're trying to do things with prompting, with alignment, right, with guardrails, and really kind of be at the end of that. Because what's happening with fine-tuning is that you can take a baseline model, you can do a lot of fine-tuning on your own data, your proprietary data. You're going to get 2 or 3 points up in terms of accuracy or relevance. But the reality is, if you just wait 3 months and your model will come out, it's going to be 2 or 3 points better. And companies have understood that yes, really, what you need to do now is just optimize for this very, very quick change of models as new and better ones come along. Right, and really, you just want you want to focus on your efforts on the downstream tasks of that.
And of course, the other thing that's emerging is that people are realizing that while we all started with fine tuning because that was the natural thing to start with, it's actually it turns out that providing these models with additional context, whatever it is, metadata or even more structure or access to other data sources is a lot more impactful than fine-tuning in many ways.
Yes, and it's also easier, right? So you do it, grounding, right? But the other thing is, yes, I don't need to invest in GPUs to fine-tune the models. I can update the data on a real-time basis, right? It's just it's a much simpler architecture. Absolutely.
All right. So on to the next section, which is the governance framework. So we ask people, does your organization actually have a AI policy framework, right? So of covering what is allowed and what isn't. As you can see, there's not much difference between the technical leaders and the rest of the respondents. And in many of this yes/no questions, what you'll notice is that there's going to be a massive difference between large companies and small companies. And so here again, right? So AI governance officer or AI governance office. So actually, I'll stop here, David. So anything here surprises you in terms of, does your organization have AI policies, or does your organization have staffing around an AI governance office?
I would say no, not really. I mean, if anything, the numbers should probably be larger on both fronts. Because I think what organizations are realizing that they do have legal risk and financial risk and reputation risk if they don't have this. and they're very early on. I think that the one thing this question probably does not capture is, what is the actual meat, right, of these policies, right, or these roles. Because definitely I've seen policies where the policy basically says, when you use ChatGPT, don't upload confidential information, right, and tune training on our own data off, which is really, there's a long way from that to having an actual AI policy that covers you, even just legally. But I think companies are coming and say, okay, let's check the box first and then kind of see what happens and see how we evolve in this area.
All right. And so actually this also aligns with the McKinsey survey, which they're also seeing that people are increasingly taking this risk mitigation aspects of AI and generative AI much more seriously, right? So there's an upward trend around increasing interest around accuracy, as David pointed out, intellectual property, and privacy risks. All right, so AI training and regulatory awareness. So is there an annual training for employees on the safe development and use of AI systems? Again, not much difference between technical leaders and the rest of the job roles, but big difference between large company and small company, which makes sense because small companies probably have less resources, and large companies usually have a team dedicated to continuing education and training and compliance, right? And so what specific regulations are people aware of or have been made aware of by their companies? So this is arranged in alphabetical order. And as you can see, for the technical leaders, big spike around the NIST AI risk management framework. And then the rest are kind of clustered together, really. I mean, I was expecting more people to mention the EU AI Act, but given that, as you recall, the respondents are mainly US based and their companies operate mainly in the US. Maybe that explains why. And the NIST risk management framework also has the imprimatur of NIST itself, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which has a long track record, particularly in the area of cybersecurity. Their frameworks there have been gold standards for the cybersecurity industry. And actually, I was made aware of this very early on, even before this framework was released, because I knew some of the people who helped develop this framework, and we had a podcast as early as March 2022. So if you haven't yet cracked open the NIST AI risk management framework, I highly encourage you to do that. It's built around this notion of measuring, managing, and mapping your risks. And yeah, and there's enough industry rallying around it that I think that it's worth reading and worth using as your starting point. So we talked about all these regulations in the previous slide. So, but as you all know, this is an active area, right? So people, different jurisdictions are introducing different laws. So we asked the question, do you have a formal process for staying on top of all of these AI laws, right? So again, the main difference here is between large companies and small companies, which makes sense, right? So large companies are probably more likely to be operating, for one thing, in different jurisdictions, so they really need to stay on top of this regulatory landscape. So one power tip that I would suggest that's useful, and at least it's useful for me, is whenever you see an action by a federal agency. So in this case, this was about 12 or 18 months ago. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission in the US, wrote a letter to OpenAI, a very detailed letter soliciting information. So what I did was I took that letter and I really kind of systematically broke it apart to understand what information is the FTC requesting OpenAI, and develop this mind map. And the reason I think this is useful is it actually gives you a good understanding of the types of things you might want to document, right? So these are the sort of areas that popped out in that letter. So if you're not yet documenting some of these areas, that might be a good place to start. And by paying attention to when there's action by these regulators, you can also see if you need to update or uh, or uh, revisit how your workflow and your risk management framework. All right, David, any comments?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, on the NIST framework. So what happened with the NIST privacy and cybersecurity frameworks is that they almost became law in effect, because what happened after, say, 5 years they've been established, is that when a lawsuit came about and say, hey, dear whatever, large enterprise, you had a breach, one of the terms that began accepted in law is to say, look, if you follow the NIST framework, then you did a commercially reasonable thing in terms of protecting yourself, right? Because everyone can have a breach, but the question is, did you have reasonable protections? And I think this is what people are expecting here. So, for example, last year, I think it was Tennessee that even passed a law that says that if a company has documented policies that show that it follows the NIST security framework, then it has safe harbor, right, in terms of breaches, and that took about 10 years. So with the NIST framework, probably also will take 10 years, and the industry will evolve. But there's the expectation that in lieu of national legislation, right, or other regulation, this will become not just the de facto industry standard, also the de facto legal standard of what protection you need to have in place, whether you're a developer or deployer. So that's definitely something to pay attention to in the US. And I think there's also been one lawsuit that actually named the NIST AI risk management framework in a hallucination-related case. The other thing I would say is around really just how fast things are evolving. So, with Pacific AI, we build and we release quarterly an updated AI governance policy suite. One of the things we have seen is that in 2024, there were 135 different state laws related to AI that passed in the US. So more than 700 laws that were submitted, out of which about 20% of them actually became law, signed. This year, I think at the beginning of the year, I remember the number was 824 kind of submitted laws. So assuming 20% of them make it through, it means that the rate of change in law, in regulation is changing. And one thing to know, whether you're a developer or a deployer, is that you need to operate legally, right? So this is not just about risk or sounding good to your customers or investors, right? This is just being able to know that you're actually within the law. And you see, within large companies, that's one of the reasons why they do this, because they have teams of lawyers, teams of compliance people who make sure that they actually read the laws and implement them. But I think even if you're a medium or small company, it's not that hard to do, right? You have those policy suites, they're free. There are ways to do this. But I think the important thing to know is that this gap between how fast people are taking use cases to production and really this lack of certainty or lack of understanding, right, whether they're doing this the right way, really has to close.
And any thoughts on this kind of suggestion I was saying, which is, whenever there's a lawsuit, take a look at it. You might learn something that you can then use to update your risk management framework.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I can tell you, it's something we do at Johnson Labs, we do at Pacific AI. Absolutely, it's track every new legislation. The standards themselves are evolving, right? So also, if you follow NIST, if you follow ISO, there really every few weeks there's going to be another draft or another version of a standard. And what's interesting with those standards is that yes, they're going to much more level of detail, right? So when you're doing incident reporting, here are the fields we need, right? When you're doing bias evaluation, here's what we mean by that, right? And there's several pages of detail there. So I'd say absolutely, it's worthwhile staying up to date. so that you're not to the point where you say, yes, oh, I did the bias evaluation, I'm good, right? And then you get hit by a lawsuit, right, or a public relations issue, and find out that not really, right? You're not even close, right, to what the commercially reasonable standard needs to be.
All right, so let's look at how people are preparing. So David mentioned AI incidents response, and again, we asked a binary question. As you can see, close to half of the or over half of the respondents claim they have an AI incident response playbook. And again, the main disparity here is between large companies and small companies. For small companies, it's only about a third. Now, AI incidents response playbook, that's a big phrase. And I don't know that I actually completely buy that everyone that says they have an AI incident response playbook has a well-developed AI incident response playbook, as David mentioned earlier, the meat, right? So it's their beef really behind their AI incident response playbooks. Because, AI incident response is a multi-step process, right? So you have to agree what's an AI incident, right? So you have to prepare for that, right? And then you have to have mechanisms to identify, and then you have to contain, and then remove it, recover, and then maybe do a post-mortem. Basically, here the goal, whenever you have an AI incident, is to minimize your time to recovery. And since these models are probabilistic, they will at some point not behave according to plan. So that's why having an AI incident response playbook is super important. So we also asked, what have you implemented so far? And again, this is arranged in alphabetical order. So as you can see, the largest response rate we got is around monitoring, which makes sense, right? Because monitoring must be something you're probably already doing just for accuracy and for the performance of your AI application. But according to this question, close to half of people are saying they also use monitoring for accuracy, misuse, and drift, right? What else? So the next largest contingent is saying they have a process for evaluating AI risks, which is great. So I'll actually, David, anything in here that you want to highlight based on your conversations?
I think it depends on the industry, but I would say, look, if you're in healthcare, in finance, in insurance, these numbers would be alarmingly low, right? Because really, I mean, you should not have any system that's not monitored for accuracy or misuse, right?
Yeah. I had the same reaction, right? So.
Yeah, exactly, right? So, if you look at other, let's say you look at just standard web application development, right? If people would say, well, only half of our websites we actually monitor if they're up, right? Or we have kind of basic, penetration testing, right? Or basic backups in place. That would be extremely alarming. I think the only reason kind of we can get away with this as an industry, right, is because really the whole industry is, less than 2 years old, right? And there's been a lot of pressure to just put something in production, put it out there and see what happens. But overall, look, you don't have model cards, you don't have any risk evaluation process, you don't have, even incident reporting, right, which seems to be here, under 20% on having specific tools to do that. So I think it feels like a lot of these projects are still in the pilot stage, right? Because it would be dangerous to deploy them as is.
All right, so then I also want to highlight some tools that you can use so if you are still in the early stages, right? So, and you are evaluating tools for any of these aspects, there are also resources that you can use to understand, all right, so what should some of these resources or tools be covering? So one such resource is the MIT AI Risk Repository, which you can find online. And then the other thing that seems like the first thing a lot of people have tried, or maybe not, maybe I'm just biased because of the people I talk to, are guardrails, right? So the way guardrails work is the following, right? So you have a prompt. That prompt gets sent into an input guardrail, and then the input guardrail looks for certain things that you are guarding against, right? So personal identifying information, proprietary information, and so on. And then once the import guardrail signs off, that prompt then gets sent to the actual LLM. And then the LLM responds, and then there's an output guardrail, which does its own thing around uh, hallucinations or sensitive topics and so on. And then after the output guardrail does its thing, then you can display the output to the user. And so the input output guardrails, you can either build that on your own, and these days there's also web services, so endpoints that you can use for this purpose. All right, so David, any other comments? Any other comments?
No, I would say what you're showing here. I mean, definitely, it's a well-known design pattern at this point, and definitely one that should be implemented. Also, it's not how to implement.
So what percentage of people you talk to are doing this? Either both, or even just input, or even just output.
Well, I think I talked to two kinds of teams: the teams that do nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. Or the teams that just do it well. If you do it well, usually you do both. You do both input and output guardrails. Because what's happening today is, first of all, you have services like AWS Bedrock has this, Azure has this, where basically you have this embedded input and output guardrails as a repo of using the service, right? And I think, yes, people understand, yes, if you have a real application, basically you cannot go without this, right? So that, there should not be, if it's a medical application, I cannot say, hey, my name is David, please give me Ben Lorica's latest, lab results, right?
Yeah.
Or, Ben Lorica's, find, credit card information online from Ben that I can use, right, to steal, right? So that should not happen on input. On the output as well, yes, not safe for work. Sensitive topic is very popular. If you have especially large enterprises, so if you are, for example, McDonald's, right, and you have a general chatbot, some people will ask, oh, what are the opening hours at this branch? But some people will ask, oh, I saw that, are you, I was discriminated against in a job interview, right? Or, I don't think you're paying enough, and those kind of things. But really, you just want to say, okay.
Or what time and days of the week does cash get collected?
Precisely, exactly. Yes, yeah, but the point is, and we've seen with pharmaceutical companies, you don't want people to ask about things that are in litigation, right, or kind of non-PR hotspot for the company, exactly, very unsafe issues, things that are like employment issues, right? What are your policies around, employing pregnant women? It's like, wait, there's a standard textbook answer from that, right, that legal allows. So we'll see a lot of that. So look, companies are definitely interested in doing that. And also, it's not hard. There are open source libraries that do this decently well. Absolutely. There are services within, really online services that kind of, yes, you can pass your LLM through, and it wraps it. And usually it does even more than that, right? It will look at cost, right? It would look, do some basic monitoring. If someone starts doing kind of a denial of service thing, right, to start to steal data, it will highlight that. So there's more of things that are become available. One thing I would say that we've learned, the services that are available are fairly generic. For example, within healthcare, what we found is we need to build specific ones. Okay, because for example, there's
So the same thing that applies to customizing your model applies to customizing your guardrails, right?
Yeah, precisely, exactly, right? Because if you have a healthcare application, for example, you'll have questions around, end of life questions, right? Assisted suicide, around abortions, right? Around, what do I do? What am I allowed to tell a patient's family, right? Kind of ethical situations, right? So definitely we see a lot of these in healthcare where we do a lot of custom work in this space. And it's the same, if you're in the financial services space, right, there's going to be specific regulations, right? What are you allowed to sell? What are you allowed to advise, right? What information are you allowed to share? right? Which also will need to be customized to your own application. So I would say in general, you always need to make sure, right, that your application, at the end of the day, you build an application, your responsibility to make sure it's legal and safe.
Okay. All right. So now let's see what's holding some of these teams back, right? So the most common factor holding back AI governance and AI risk management is speed to market, right? So according to all respondents, and also more pronounced is according to technical leaders, right? So, and then the next item here on this list will be no budget or lack of budget or allocated resources. If you go to company size, right? So speed to market is definitely number one for large companies, but they also cite lack of internal knowledge, which makes sense because these are all emerging topics.
Yep.
But for small companies, right? So it's the lack of budget that is really the one that's holding them back. And so David, very quickly, because we're winding down here. So any comments?
No, I'd say this makes sense. It aligns with what I see.
All right. So then what's our path forward, right? So first of all, there are resources that are emerging that you might want to look at as if you don't have yet, or if you feel like your governance framework or risk management framework for generative AI is still early. There are resources that are emerging. So OWASP, for example, has published a bunch of handbooks. So one of the things that is clear in this space is the following, right? So there's, even though people are aware and they might be doing risk management, one of the challenges is that there's just fragmentation for the tools, right? So there are certain tools for checking copyright, best of breed tools for bias, best of breed tools for privacy, and so on and so forth. So that's an ongoing challenge in this field. And also the other ongoing challenge is just the fact that unlike the previous waves of AI, there's a lot more personas and teams involved. So here I'm just going to quickly sketch a typical scenario that I hear a lot about in many companies. First highlighted to me by the folks at Luminos, right? So data scientists might be asking a lawyer if it's okay to deploy a model, and then the lawyer asks for more information. Data scientist then goes ahead and compiles that information, but it will take about a week, right? Because they have to track down a bunch of things that they have to pull from multiple areas, right? So GitHub, Jira, and so on. And then, the lawyer gets this information and they can't really respond right away. They have to review it. And so then after they review, which might take another 2 weeks, the lawyer, will most likely say, that was good, but I still need a few things from you. And then the data scientist will say, let me get back to you. And then could be another 3 weeks, right? Because this extra level of information may require other teams, and so on and so forth. So the point here is that with AI risk involving compliance officers and compliance office, this friction is something that happens all the time. And like I said, there's a fragmentation of tools just for the technical teams, right? So there's best of breed tools for every aspect of risk, but there's also a fragmentation between the personas, right? So the ML and ML ops teams have their tools, but then the governance risk compliance teams might have their own tools. And so the vision here is, and this is something that the folks at Luminos first alerted me to, is the vision is, what if you can take that fragmentation and just have people work off of a single platform, right? So they can plug in their tools, but the workflow management and testing is taking place inside this platform. So right now, the earlier scenario that I outlined, this one that has a lot of going back and forth between the different parts of your company, that's all taking place in Google Docs, most likely, or a Google spreadsheet. So, yeah, so there is definitely a place for a unified platform that can allow people to bring their tools of choice and then interact and exchange information and reporting and testing in that platform. All right, so what are some of the key takeaways? One, as David pointed out, it's depressingly low how few people are monitoring. And so first thing you can do is just instrument, right? So make sure that you are doing at least the bare minimum of monitoring for risk. Secondly, you know that these models are unlikely to behave as planned 100% of the time, right? So you know that just because you've probably done prompt engineering on your own, right? So these models are probabilistic, and at some point they will misbehave. And so what you need to do is have a bare minimum of an AI incident response at this point. And as David pointed out, your AI incident response plans might have to be tailored for your specific use case and domain. And then obviously, if you want to do this on a repeated basis, you might want to make sure that a lot of these steps and testing are part of your part of your pipelines, right? So otherwise, if it's very manual and very high friction, that's where people start doing shortcuts. Yeah, and so the other thing is there are resources out there, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel from scratch. Make sure that you go to folks like Pacific AI and see what they have to say. Maybe they have tools to help you not only work through the existing risk management frameworks, but also help you develop custom ones for your domain. And then, like I said, so the vision moving forward is, at some point in the future, it'll be great if the different parts of your company can work together in a unified environment where they can bring their favorite tools of choice, but they can do all of their interaction, messaging, testing, and reporting in that platform. And that's all I have. And David, I did skip through 2 sections. Feel free to add your color commentary to any of these sections.
Yep. So I think when you look at tools, I think a platform should do 3 things. First of all, is definitely you should connect all the roles and people within the organizations who take part, right? So it's going to be as the data scientists, to build teams, the product managers, the compliance officers, legal and compliance team, absolutely, so that kind of anyone can feel comfortable and see where the systems are. And small organizations might have just one thing they do. Large organizations and have 200-300 systems they're managing.
So do you see what I'm hearing these days, which is right now people are doing all of this on Google Docs?
If at all, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And because they're just sending it up, yes. But I would say there are 2 more things you'd want this kind of platform to do. First of all, what you want good tools to do is basically to automate best practices, right? So you want to be at the point where you say, okay, I have the NIST AI risk management framework. Or for example, at Pacific AI, we reviewed, at this point, it's 27 different healthcare guidelines frameworks, right? Because there's a whole lot of them people use, and we've unified them, but we want to get to a point, look, if you use your tool and just go into DI, follow these processes, follow this workflow, yes, when a NIST auditor comes, you can go control by control and check all the boxes, right? So you don't expect everyone in your organization to read all of these, right? The OWASP, right, and NIST and ISO standards. You want them to be kind of to have the tool basically naturally help them follow those processes. So I think a good tool kind of automates a lot of these best practices. And the third thing a tool needs to do is basically embed kind of the industry best practices, right? Because one of the challenges, for example, I'm a data scientist. I go to a lawyer. The lawyer asks me, how do you test for bias? The data scientist, well, I don't know, what do you need, right? And the lawyer can say, well, I'll check it. But the reality is a lawyer does not know how to do bias testing of an LLM. Okay, and a data scientist may also want to do this. Really, what the organization needs to do is come and say, look, we want to do something that's good and that's kind of commercially reasonable, right? What everybody does. Same thing when you look at cybersecurity and kind of say, oh, did you do penetration testing, right? At this point, after 20 years we've been working on this, the answer is just yes or no, because there is a well-defined definition of what is good penetration testing, right, and what it means. You can just get the service. Right? Yes, there's companies, they do this, they know all the details. So one of the other things we're doing at Pacific AI is we're looking at things like how should you properly do bias testing, right? And there are many categories there, right? So around jailbreaking, prompt engineering, just basically red teaming, right? So yes, there are 17 categories of red teaming. Each one of them is subcategories, right? How do we test them? But the point is we need to get to a point where, okay, did you red team this in development? Yes. Okay. Are you red teaming this in production to some extent? Yes. And it would be very clear within the tool, within the platform, what this means, how this actually works, so that both the developers, like the compliance teams, the customers, can know that, okay, this is actually been done the right way. Because I think at the end of the day, we're not going to expect, right, everyone, every data scientist and every lawyer to understand the details here. But we still need to make it easy for organizations to adopt those best practices.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that I hope we get to the point is where these different teams can actually bring their tools of choice, right? So, So like you said, the data scientists might be testing for bias, but then they might have different types of bias tools that they want to use, right? So ideally, you want to be able to encourage them to keep using those tools while interacting with the other parts of the organization, right?
Yes. I agree. I mean, I think definitely each organization, each team should be able to choose its own tools. But I think one thing to consider is that most teams do not know which tools to use, right? So you want to come and say, look, if you don't know, here's the recommended one. It's pretty good. It covers these use cases, right? So that, if you have two data scientists that are doing a project, you can get them to production safely, right? Without having them take weeks or months to go and learn things that they have not learned so far.